In this episode of the Church Photographers Podcast, how much of a difference does my gear make? Do I need a top-end camera to capture solid images, or can I use the gear I have? We're going to answer all this and more in just a moment, but first, I'm Rob Lauder.
I'm Connor Strickland,
and this is the Church Photographers Podcast. All right, man, welcome back to Church Photographer Studios. So
glad to be here,
Yeah,
back
me
in the
too.
studio.
And when we say back, we mean we just recorded the previous episode 4 minutes before this because we're batching now. And so we're going to bring you the best quality content we can as reliably and efficiently as we can. But y'all don't need to know that.
Nope.
All right. But they do now. Dude, we're talking about gear today.
We are.
And
Again.
we did just talk about gear last time. And so for a reminder, if you go back to last week's episode where we covered our holiday gear guide, you can go download our top recommendations on any budget, any brand. What gear do you need? churchphotographers.com/freebies. Go grab that and then come back and we're going to talk about, does your gear even matter in the first place?
Yep.
So share with the world. Does your gear matter?
It depends.
It depends. They say that, the best camera is the one that you have with you, right? So if you don't have gear at all, your gear is going to make a big difference.
Yep.
But if you do have gear, there's going to be some limitations that you have from the gear that you're shooting with, and we'll talk about where those limitations come in and what they mean for your photography. But then also, a pro with low-end gear can probably do way more than an amateur with high-end gear.
For sure.
And so in some senses, the amount of difference your gear makes is going to be much less if you know how to, make up for lower quality gear. And so let's talk about some different levels of gear.
Yep.
Then we'll talk about different types of gear. We'll talk about bodies. We'll talk about lenses. And then finally, we'll talk about when to upgrade and what to do if you have low quality gear to make up for that. So different levels of gear. Number one, the camera that we almost all have, unless you live under a rock or you are still living in the 1960s, your smartphone. Man, I've talked about this before. I've been a snob about smartphone photography.
Yep.
I've put up my nose at it. I've made fun of it. And then the other day, I took out my phone in the middle of a service. I pulled up a raw camera app. I took some photos. I edited them. I'm like, dang it, that's almost as good as I can get out of my DSLR.
Yep. And then when you post it to Instagram and it's compressed already, who's really going to know?
Nobody's going to know.
And that's sad.
People will know. We'll talk about the differences.
Yeah, we will.
But that's level one. Mobile, point and shoot. So I lump those together. We've got to define point and shoot real quick. Like point and shoot is that there's that GIF online of the old lady who's taking a photo and she holds it up in her face and has a camera flipped around the wrong way and flashes it in her eyes. That's the point and shoot. It's kind of like the all-in-one. You don't have interchangeable lenses. The lens kind of pops out.
Great sound effect.
Thank you. I've been working on that. And then it's it's all self-contained. If you are tempted to go to a point and shoot, just stop.
Go check out our gear guide. We offer some great camera options for under $500.
Indeed, and that's not point and shoot. So if it comes down to I'm going to use a point and shoot like the Cyber Shot or whatever, just pull out your phone.
Yep.
Do yourself a favor. Do the world a favor.
Please do.
Don't go point and shoot. I will be a snob about that.
Yeah.
Next level. What's our next level?
Next level is entry level or advanced entry. Mm-hmm. These are your entry level DSLRs. Getting away from a point and shoot or a phone and grabbing your first real camera with interchangeable lenses. You can add accessories, etc. Once again, in our gear guide, we offer some great options. My first ever entry level camera was a Canon T3, and I actually used it for 4 years and got my first year and a half worth of paid clients, all coming from that entry level camera.
Yeah, and so a lot of portrait photographers out there will grab a entry level camera. They'll make do with it, and they'll produce some pretty good work.
Yeah, and then make money, and then save that money. Then you can upgrade to something like our next tier.
The next tier, the enthusiast or prosumer, it'll often be called level. We're not quite on the professional grade, but this is like the consumer grade cameras that I'm willing to make a little bit of an investment.
Yep.
And I'm going to get some more advanced features out of it. I'm going to get some higher quality out of it. And then I'm going to be able to produce much better images if our gear matters, which we'll get to how to produce good quality images without
breaking the bank. Yep.
All right, and then finally we've got the professional tier, and obviously this is the tier of camera that unless you are doing it for a living, you're probably not going to need a professional grade camera. I live in the prosumer tier.
Same here.
I've got my D750 body. It's like a 6-year-old DSLR body. I've got the Nikon Z6. both like good prosumer grade cameras, going to produce some good images. I can do paid work. I can do good quality work from my church. But again, if gear matters, there's going to be a level of quality that I'm probably going to struggle to hit if I'm shooting with this gear. So that's where, if you are a professional, the professional series cameras will make a big difference. On Nikon, this is like the D5, the flagship. The all the features, no holds barred, super awesome camera.
Yeah. So speaking of that, let's jump into bodies and explain a little bit about the bodies. And does it really matter the body that you have?
Yeah. So we touched on this in the last episode too. So go back and listen to that. But there's a couple of specific elements about a camera body that will affect the quality of image that you are able to produce. Again, the gear that you're shooting with, it's not going to affect your composition. It's not going to affect your eye for a photo. It's not going to affect how you work the settings on the camera, but there will be limitations. Like if you're going to take a Ford Focus out against a Ferrari, like one of those is obviously going to perform better than the others. But if you take two Ford Focuses out there with an amateur driver and a pro driver, you're going to get a clear winner.
Yep.
So here's some of the factors that go into what factors will affect the quality of the image with regard to body. First is sensor size.
Yep.
Talked about this in the last episode, but you've got crop sensor versus full frame. It refers to the physical size of your sensor. The crop sensor is much smaller. The full frame is much larger. Larger sensor typically means more light is going to get in, and you're going to have a better low light performance. You're going to have better autofocus, and those are tools that you can use to produce a better image, but not necessarily because gear matters to a point.
Yep.
Next thing, we got resolution, which resolution doesn't really matter as much as you think. Like resolution refers to the number of pixels, like actual pixels of data that are recorded. When you hear megapixels, that's what it's talking about. And it's like, a lot of people think, well, more megapixels. They get the point and shoot that has a 36 megapixel resolution, and it's like, why do my images not look as good as this
full frame?
But so my D750 and the Z6 both shoot at around 24 megapixels. Not the greatest, not the most amount of pixels, but it's that sensor that's going to make a lot of the difference. Talk about ISO. Like, how does ISO affect the quality?
Yeah, how much light can you bring in? Can you shoot in super low light, super high light? The more expensive the camera, the wider range of ISO you're going to have. If you have an entry-level grade or something like a phone, it's going to be hard for you to control that ISO. So you're going to get some shots that are going to be super blurry, going to be super blown out. It's going to be hard for you to control what your camera is actually capturing based off of the uncontrollable environment around you.
Indeed. Another thing that kind of relates to that in some ways is the dynamic range that your camera can capture.
Definitely.
It's basically like when light data hits your sensor, it can only capture so much of the data that it has available with a range of values. So like if we were talking about on the web, that's a range of values from 0 to 255. And 0 is like pitch black, 255 is completely white. But there are values outside of that if you have a camera that captures high dynamic range, can capture that. So your sensor will also affect the amount of dynamic range you can pull out of an image. That's how low can you go with shadows, how bright can you go with highlights, and how much information can you recover into a usable image in post.
For sure.
And that's assuming you're shooting RAW. RAW will capture all of that data straight off the sensor. So your ISO, your sensor, your dynamic range will affect that. And then just frame rate. And what I have in mind here is for photographers. Not like frame rate for video, though that does matter if you want to pick up a body for video. But the rate at which your camera will shoot consecutive images can affect your ability to capture the right moment at the right time. So if you're doing anything fast motion, sports, live music, etc., you're going to want a camera that has a higher frame rate, because if you are super talented and you've got that eye and you've got perfect timing, you can get a really good image with a low frame rate or even a single shot. But I shoot in burst a lot because I know that there's going to be like nuances. Like if I'm shooting a guitarist and he's in the middle of a ripping solo, there's going to be nuances between like the fraction of a second before and after a specific event that I can go back and look and say which one of these expressions, which one of these poses do I like the best. And so my D750 shoots at 7 frames a second. My Z6 shoots at 12 frames a second. If I'm going for, hey, I want to capture motion, like I shot baptisms a couple weeks ago, and I did that with my Z6 because I know I can get more frames per second. I can capture that exact moment a lot easier.
Definitely.
And then finally, video features. Man, you're the video guy in the room. So talk about just a couple of video features that might come into a body and how that might affect the outcome of your quality of images.
Yep. First and foremost is going to be, can you have an external microphone? Most of the cameras...
First and foremost, can you shoot video?
Well, for sure. Yeah, first and foremost,
that is a consideration.
Can your camera even do video? If it does, great. First hurdle was jumped over. Second, as from my experience, is can you add an external microphone directly onto it? There are a ton of options out there with microphones these days. We both use Rode shotgun mics, and they can plug straight into it. You don't have to worry about an additional recorder, which is what we're recording this podcast on. So that is a huge benefit. And then also frame rates in terms of working with video, 24, 30, 60, 96, 120. Kind of your big main ones. So like some of the Sonys, one of the Sonys that I use, also the Panasonic GH4 I used to use for video, could shoot up to 120 and then play back super slow-mo. You shoot it at 720p, so the quality isn't going to be there. But most people shoot in 60 frames, 60 in 4K or 1080, and then you can slow it down to slow-mo, speed ramp it up. And those are all things, if you're trying to do video, are things that you definitely need to pay attention to. And then the option for those frame rates is going to come with how much are you wanting to just put into your camera.
Yeah, and then I just want to underscore here, like, all of these are things that you can get by with lower end gear.
You can,
if you are super talented and you know your gear really well.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about that after the break. But if you are super comfortable with your gear, you don't need top of the line. You can get by with mid range or even entry level.
Yep.
But with some of the tools that higher end gears brings you, and they are tools because you can just mess up just as bad if you have higher end gear if you got lower end gear. But some of those tools that a body can bring you will affect the quality of your images. We'll talk about how to compensate for that here in a little bit. But first, we got to hear from some friends of ours. So let's cut to a message, and then we'll be right back.
Alrighty, we're back, and we're about to jump into lenses. Does it really matter what lenses I have? Should I spend more money on my lenses, or should I just go the cheap route? Well, let's dive into it.
Yeah, so does the quality of your lens matter? And again, the answer is going to be it could.
It
may not.
Yep.
It matters to a point. And so let's toe that line. Let's talk about what factors within a lens do matter and which factors do not matter as much.
Yep.
And so the first big question is, like, when you're out there shopping for lenses, you've got like the name brand lenses.
Yep.
So those are from
Nikon,
the manufacturers, Nikon, Canon, Sony. Then you've got third-party lenses, Sigma, Tamron being two very popular ones, Rokinon, some. And then you've got like the bargain bin lenses, and those are clearly like, all right, I'm looking at a comparable lens from the manufacturer. This one is 1/10 the price.
Yep.
Does that matter?
Yep.
And I'll say that of those tiers, absolutely it matters if you're considering the bargain bin.
For sure.
Those images or those lenses are going to have no autofocus.
Yeah.
They're going to be very low quality. The images that you get are going to like have weird colors, weird tones, weird
sharpness isn't going to be there.
Yeah. And so that is going to be a consideration. But when it comes to the difference between third-party and name brand lenses, this is where I think it doesn't matter quite as much. Now, obviously, the name brand lenses are going to be tuned for the camera that they're being shot upon. Yep. So if I'm shooting with a Nikon camera and I'm shooting the Nikon 70-200 2.8, it's going to likely perform better than the Tamron 70-200 2.8. Yep. But the point at which the difference is made is like if you're just like really pixel peeping, and pixel peeping means like pulling up Lightroom, zooming all the way in, and comparing like pixel for pixel, not big picture. And so I shoot with almost all third-party gear. Yep. Tamron is my go-to. Tamron's new G2 stabilization is incredible. Stabilization just means there's an element inside the lens that if I'm like hyped up on Starbucks and I'm trying to do a shoot and I'm shaky, my lens saves me. And then with modern mirrorless bodies too, that they would have in-body stabilization too.
Yep.
But yeah, like all my gear from a lens standpoint is third party, with the exception I picked up the Nifty 50 from Nikon because it's dirt cheap.
And what do you see being the trade-off for the price point of getting the third party versus the name brand. Like you're saying, if you're like really crunching the pixels there, but what's that price difference going to come between a third party versus a Nikon brand?
Yeah, it's like half the price.
Yeah,
so it's
exactly.
it's for me, it made absolute sense to save half the cost,
Yep.
go with the third party lens, and it's like the 80-20 rule. You get 80% of your results out of 20% of your input.
Yep.
To go that extra 20% and get the 100% result, it's a much bigger leap.
Yep, for sure.
And so for me, that third party was the way to go. Some considerations though, third party lenses. I just upgraded to the Z6.
Mm-hmm.
When the Z6 came out, my Tamron lenses would not have been compatible with the adapter that came with that.
Yep.
And so I would have had to wait for a firmware upgrade. But those third-party manufacturers do give you a way to upgrade the firmware to make them compatible with the camera you're
Yep.
shooting with. I didn't have to worry about that because I bought my lenses out or bought my body after the firmware was released, and so I could just upgrade, be done,
Yep.
and go with it. So that's again, any other tool. These are all tools. If you have like throw one of those little goofy
little
clip-on lenses
lenses,
on
right,
your
iPhone.
smartphone,
Yep.
and a pro can get some interesting images.
They can.
But there's going to be some trade off in terms of quality as well. So that's where lenses matter. Let's talk about accessories though, because
Yep.
I just had a question from one of our photographers last week. He said, I'm shooting in burst mode, but I can't shoot as fast as my camera says I can.
Yeah.
Why is that?
That has to do with his SD card.
Right here.
And how fast of an SD card is he using? What class is it? I shoot all class 10 SD cards because I primarily do video.
Mm-hmm.
So for video, if you are using any of the mid-range classes of an SD card, your camera is not able to write fast enough to that SD card as it is capturing in real time.
Yep.
So it either is going to be extremely lagging or it is going to just quit recording. And back when I was first getting into it, I had a couple of shoots that I was doing. Well, I'd be halfway through an interview and it would just quit recording, or it split this clip into 15 different clips, and it became a nightmare. So now I shoot all class 10. It's also the same reason why if you're in burst mode or you're taking photos and then you want, as soon as you're done, you want to go back and look through them, and it's just sitting there spinning, or there's a red light and you're like, is my camera frozen? No, it's not frozen. It's just your card is trying to catch up to the pace that your camera's trying to write.
Yeah, I used to shoot in my D750. I'd have two card slots.
Yep.
And I set it for overflow. So
Yep.
I'd fill the first card, then go to the second card. I had my cheaper card in the second slot.
Yep.
And so if I filled my first card, all of a sudden it'd be like my burst mode got cut in half or
For sure.
or a third.
Yep.
Because those lower end cards don't write as much. And so again, that's a tool. If I'm shooting single shots, doesn't make as big a difference. But if I'm shooting burst mode, it will make a difference there. And then also to consider the volunteer that emailed me about this, he was doing RAW to the first card, JPEG to the second card.
Okay.
And because the second card was a slower card, it was writing to both with each shot, and so he was losing the speed of his shutter
Yeah.
in exchange for writing that second card.
Yeah.
So invest in good quality SD cards. Like my preferred brand is the SanDisk
Yep.
Extreme Pro. They're like, a 64 gig card is like $25 now.
Yeah. They're coming down in price
Yeah.
weekly.
Yeah, you can get like 128 for $35. Just like
Yeah.
that. So invest in good SD cards. A couple of other accessories that make a difference. If you shoot with speed lights, like speed lights do make a significant difference. Again, you've got the different tiers. You've got the bargain bin, you've got the name brand, and then you've got the third party that
Yep.
do good work. And I would say the same thing with lenses applies here. Avoid your bargain bin unless it's
Yep.
the only thing you can get. And even then, you might want to reconsider.
Yep. Or consider renting or something.
Yeah, I started with bargain bin speed lights, and very quickly I'm like, these things are junk.
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't cycle right. They'd be inconsistent in terms of the light that they put out. I had some triggers, but they just didn't trigger half the time.
Yeah.
Or they'd trigger without me pushing a button. That's when I went to I started looking at name brand gear, and like the Nikon speed lights are $300, $400, $500 a pop. I'm like, man, it's just a flashlight, right?
Yep.
It's more than that. They are finely tuned machines.
Yeah.
But I landed on, if you're watching on video, this is the Cactus speed light that we showed in our gear guide last week, churchphotographers.com/freebies. Grab that gear guide. But it's a good third-party piece of equipment and produces very consistent results. So again, all of these things are tools. things that will impact the quality of your image. But if you are skilled with your gear, you can compensate for. So let's talk about how to compensate for these things.
Yep.
And then we'll talk about maybe when to upgrade, because there are some things that you can do with your existing gear that will help you shoot much more reliably, much more consistently, and produce much better results. So if you have the first thing, let's talk about how to compensate on your body.
Yep.
If you are shooting on a lower end body that has lower light performance, one thing you can do is upgrade lenses.
Yep.
So if you have a kit lens, which is the lens that came with your camera, and you know something about aperture, you'll notice the aperture is probably like at f3.5 to 5.6,
Yep.
or maybe up to 6.3. What that means is that it's going to be lower quality and low light because it's a slower lens, doesn't let in as much light. And so if you upgrade to a faster lens, meaning a lower f-stop number like a 1.8 or a 1.4, or at the bare minimum a 2.8, that's one area where you can compensate and not necessarily get a new body.
For sure.
You just get some new lenses, but lenses are expensive too, let's be honest. And so you can compensate and work with your body in the meantime. Another thing you can do on the body is learn how to shoot in manual mode.
Definitely.
If you do not know how to shoot in manual mode, you absolutely have to learn, because the brains inside your camera aren't nearly as fast or as smart as the brains in your head.
Yep.
And the eyeballs in the camera aren't nearly as sensitive as the eyeballs in your head. So if you learn to shoot in manual mode, you can overcome a lot of the decisions that the camera is making and produce good quality images.
For sure.
So it's like, if I know if I'm in a low light situation and I'm shooting on a crop sensor body with a slow lens, I need to find ways to compensate for that. And so that might be shoot in burst mode and you hope one of them comes out clear. That might be use a monopod so that you reduce camera shake and you can get more clear images. Those are all things that you can do without upgrading your gear. You just need to know why the quality is affected and how to compensate for it.
Yep.
And then that'll affect everything from shutter speed to ISO to aperture. All of those things work together. And so that's how you can do that. One way to compensate on lenses, like say, hey, I need a lens that I can get really close up and a lens that's really far away, but I don't have any budget to buy a new lens and I have a 50 millimeter.
Yep.
Zoom with your feet.
Walk.
Yep. So we'll get closer and get farther away, back up. Those are some things that you can do to compensate.
Yep.
And then with your accessories, like accessories are cheap. I would say just invest in good accessories.
Yeah.
An extra $25, get a good SD card, and you're solved there. So again, all of these things are tools. All of these things are means to an end. If you know how to compensate, then you will have better quality images.
Because if you're shooting in auto mode on an entry-level body versus a prosumer body, it wasn't worth you spending all that extra money to get the prosumer model, spend a couple $1,000 if you're still just going to shoot in the auto mode.
Right. But there are some signs that can tell you when it's time to upgrade. Right?
There are.
So like if you hit some of these signs and it's like, I'm pushing it here. These are some reasons that you might want to upgrade. So let's walk through a couple of those, Connor.
Yeah. So first one, when you have mastered your skills and now the gear is what's holding you back. So you've jumped that first big hurdle and learning curve of like, holy cow, how do I actually use my camera, manual focus, all that. When you get to that point where the only thing that is becoming the ceiling for you is the gear, might be a great time for you to go ahead and invest in some more gear.
Yeah, I think this was both of our stories.
Yeah,
like for me, when I invested in my own gear, it's because I want to get photos of my kids.
Yep.
I got a $500 kit off of Groupon or something like that. Got the entry-level Nikon D30-100. Got a kit lens, and then just started like wanting to compose and create some photos that I just couldn't with that body. So I wanted to learn astrophotography. I went out and tried to capture some images of the stars, and technically I did. And if you go back and look at them, it's like you can maybe tell
is
that
that
stars.
is that a speck on your lens or is that a star?
But then as soon as I upgraded to my full frame gear, like I could capture those images, and like I sold one Milky Way print. I sold $1,000 of prints in a week.
Wow.
That I could not have done with my body.
For sure.
My old body. So that was my impetus. And then also when I started getting requests for portraits.
For sure.
And I was like, can I really
charge
give this image to them and pay money? And people do. Kudos to you if you do. But I think that people are well served with quality images as well from a technical perspective, not just an aesthetic perspective.
Yep. And that brings us to our second point of when it's time to upgrade is when you have the budget to do so.
Yeah.
So if you're out making money off of your gear, you're starting to get paid gigs, now is the time to invest in higher professional gear.
Yeah.
This was my story. I was shooting, like I said, on the T3, had the first year and a half worth of paid clients, and I should have reinvested that back in my gear a lot sooner than I did, but I didn't. However, once I reinvested it back into my gear, I was then able to land bigger clients and keep moving up that way. So for me, it was a mix of both the first point and this point. I kind of hit my ceiling with using the entry-level gear. Now I have the budget to invest. Let's just make the plunge and go ahead and upgrade.
Indeed. And so that's like you're creating an economic engine for your gear. Like I'm in a very fortunate place because I have a really good full-time gig.
Yeah.
And so my photography work is a side hustle for me and a hobby for me.
Yep.
And so I am able to invest more of what I earn into my gear. But if you're a volunteer in a church or if you are on staff at a church and you have gear, like that's an asset that you can use and leverage to produce some revenue.
Absolutely.
And then you can invest in higher quality gear.
Absolutely.
And so like even if for me, like one, you can get paid clients with a entry level body because that's exactly what I did. Right?
I was in college, had a T3, paid $300 for it, and the first client I landed doubled that.
Yeah, and so you do one or two shoots, and you can now upgrade to a full frame body.
Absolutely,
right? You do that, and you raise your rates. You do one or two more shoots, you can do even a higher quality lens or a better body, whatever you need to invest in.
Yep.
So there are like the gear that you have now is a means for producing new gear if you're savvy and if you are driven, and if you've got the boldness to go out there and charge for what you do.
Yeah.
So if you're a church photographer, like that's. And your church isn't investing in gear for you, but you want to do better work, like freelancing is definitely an option.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. So I hope that has cleared up for you and for those listening and watching. What factors do affect gear? How can you compensate for that? One thing to keep an eye out for, though, is coming early next year, coming early 2020, we're going to have a whole series of courses. Yeah. And shooting in poor lighting, shooting DSLR fundamentals are going to be in that course library. Yep. And if you dig into that and if you up your skills, you can compensate for the year that you already have. Yep. So you don't need to go out and buy $5,000 worth of gear, not just quite yet, until you hit one of those barriers that keep you going. Man, how can they find us online?
Yeah, so you can check us out on our website at churchphotographers.com. You can go back and find our entire gear list and all our freebies in our vault at churchphotographers.com/freebies. We're online, Facebook and Instagram at Church Photographers. We want to send us a message, podcast at churchphotographers.com.
Yeah, and one thing that keeps us going too is our reviews and the comments that we get both on Facebook, on our YouTube channel, but then also on our podcast. Here's one that just came in on Tuesday from SPD426. 5-star review says this: I've been volunteering for my church photo team for over 5 years, and this podcast has opened my eyes to new things, reinforced learned skills, and helped confirm things I was passionate about. If you're in a small church, big church, or any church in between, there's information here that will help you grow and influence or introduce ideas to push you forward in helping your church reach your community and keep your focus on God.
Wow.
Man, that's why we do what we do.
It is.
Right here. And so if you appreciate this content, man, subscribe. Like the numbers matter to us too, because we want to see numbers going up. We don't want to see a plateau. Share this content with somebody who needs it, just one person or many people. Share it to all your friends for all we care. And then we love to hear from you. So go back and leave a review. Those reviews and ratings help too, because it gets us more visibility in the podcast directory.
Definitely.
All right, man. That's all we got time for today. Looking forward to hearing from y'all next time. I'm Rob.
I'm Connor.
See you next time.